guys, it's time for another ranking video, and for today's ranking video I'm going to be ranking all of my Colourpop palettes, and I have a feeling this is going to be really tough. So I actually did a video with all of these palettes a couple of days ago. I will leave that up in the corner. It was basically a palette bingo where I chose one shade from each palette and I did a look with it. And it ended up being kind of crazy, but it was really fun, and that's what kind of made me want to do a ranking video as well. So here we are. I'm going to rank all of these palettes from my least favorite to my favorite Colourpop palette. Now, most of these palettes are the monochromatic palettes. The only two that are not monochromatic is the Chasing Rainbows palette, which looks like this. And then I also have the Make Up Your Mind palette, which is just an all shimmer palette with 6 shades in it. So let's go ahead and rank these. I do have 11 palettes, so let's just start with the number 11, which is going to be my least favorite Colourpop palette. And honestly, just from looking at these, I feel like this is all going to come down to like color preference for me, because obviously, since a lot of these are monochromatic, there are some colors that I just like more than others. So for that reason, my least favorite Colourpop palette is the Honey palette, because I just don't find this palette to be very versatile. I find this to be just lacking a lot of dimension and depth, and there's just only so many things you can do with this. And also, just top that off, like yellow is not really one of my favorite shades or colors, especially as in like a monochromatic look. Like I never want to do like a yellow monochromatic look. Like it's just not really something that I'm in the mood for very often. So that's going to be my number 11 palette. So I feel like this is going to be really tough, because I'm looking at all of these and like I can find reasons to put all of these palettes in different spots. So for me to pick like a spot for every palette, it's tough. It's really tough. If you've ever tried to rank anything in your collection, you would know how hard this is, because I am majorly struggling with this. But I think that the palette that's going to end up being in my number 10 spot, I don't want to do this because I like this palette, but I think the palette that's going to come next is going to be the Orange You Glad palette. Again, this is more of like a color preference kind of thing, and also both of these palettes that is in my 11 and 10 spot have a pressed glitter in it, and I just don't like pressed glitter. So basically to me this is an 8-pan palette, because I will never use this shade. So I don't know, the fact that the shade is not in here makes this palette very boring for me, because there's not really any exciting shimmers. I mean, I suppose this one is kind of exciting, but other than that, this is just kind of a boring palette, and it's very neutral for me, given that it has a brown up here, it has like 2 beiges, and it's just kind of it's just kind of boring. So that's why this ended up being my number 10 palette. For my number 9 spot, I feel like this is going to come as no surprise, but this is the red one, and it's the Main Squeeze palette. So you can see a theme here that most of the palettes that are on the bottom are like the most neutral ones, because this one again has some kind of neutrally shades, especially like this middle shade here and this kind of shade here, and they're all just kind of like browns and like reds, and I don't know, this is not a palette that I would ever use on its own. I do believe that all of these shadows are really beautiful individually, but I wouldn't want to use them just like with this palette. But if I were to wear this palette with, say, the purple palette, like now this palette all of a sudden becomes much more exciting because I pair it with something that I like more. But as for like a standalone palette, this just doesn't really do it for me. I will say though that the quality of all of these, from what I've tried, now there are some of these palettes that I've only used once, but so far the quality that I've experienced with all of these palettes have been really, really good. So I can't judge any of these based on like the performance of the actual palettes. This is way more so just based on like color and color preferences. So I feel like this kind of ranking is a little bit different than the ones that I've done with, say, my Juvia's Place palettes and stuff, because that's not just all about the colors, because they all have really good color stories. So there are some palettes there that perform better than others, but with all of these I feel like the performance is very on par across the board. So let's move into, where am I at? 11, 10, 9. So let's move into the number 8 palette on my list here, and I think that's actually going to end up being the Lilac You a Lot palette. And the reason why this palette ended up kind of low, even though I really like purple and I really like lilac, is because I feel like this palette just also does not really have enough depth. Like, yeah, these two colors do look pretty dark, but they're really not that dark once you put them on your eyes. And I also just feel like the mattes in here don't really get me excited. When saying that, I mean that the way that they're paired together don't make me excited. Like, it's hard to explain what I'm trying to say here, but I just don't feel like I get excited by using this one and this one in my crease together, as well as this one, and these two don't really go together, these two don't go together, these two kind of go together, but then I would need something in between, and I feel like this one isn't it because of like the cool toneness of the shadow. I don't know, they just don't work that well together in my mind, so for that reason they don't get me excited. And I also just feel like the saturation of all of these shimmer shades are very similar. They're all kind of like a light to medium kind of strength, and that means you can't really like lay them next to each other because they're all just going to kind of end up blending together and looking very similar. So I don't know, this palette just doesn't really do it for me, but since it is like purples and pinks, it makes me more excited than something like yellows and oranges, because I do like me some purple. So that's why this palette ended up in this spot. And then I think next, moving on, is going to be, ooh, this is close. Like, I literally just changed my mind when looking at these palettes. Ooh, I don't know what I want to do. Oh, I think the next one is going to be my Pleasure palette. I like this a little bit more because I feel like this palette has a little bit more depth, and also it has more variation in the tones of the shimmers as well as the mattes, because this one does have quite a dark matte, and it also has a light shimmer and a dark shimmer, whereas I felt like with the Lilac You A Lot palette, it didn't have a light and a dark shimmer, it just had shimmers that were similar across the board, and that made that palette kind of boring. But this one is a lot more exciting to me for that reason. So, and I also feel like there's more you can do with this, even though I really do wish that this had a dark purple matte, and I don't know why it didn't, because it is the purple palette. Makes no sense to me at all, but I still like this palette. But with all of these palettes, I definitely prefer them more as like companion palettes, because I don't do a lot of monochromatic looks. I prefer to have more than just one tone of color in my look, so I definitely like to use these more along with like other things, because that just makes me more excited. So let's move on. I think the next palette on my list here is actually going to be the pink palette, which is the Ooh La La palette. I like this palette a lot. I don't really have a lot of complaints about this palette. I think this palette is beautiful. Again, it's a little bit too like neutrally for me to put this up any higher, but the shadows in here that are really nice are absolutely stunning, and I really like them. I do like Sandbar. I mean, who has anything from Colourpop and don't own Sandbar? I mean, I feel like everybody owns that shade, and I really like that. And I also really like the shimmers in this palette. I think the shimmers in here are stunning. They're some of the nicest shimmers in all of these monochromatic palettes, in my opinion. And yeah, I really like this palette. So that's going to be my number, what are we at now? Number 6, I think? Yep, that was number 6. So let's move into number 5. So for my number 5 palette, I'm actually going to say the Make Up Your Mind palette. This isn't even a palette I bought myself. I got this like free with purchase. I don't remember what I bought, but I think it was like a promotion where they said you have to spend so and so much money.
Wow, that was really bad grammar.
You had to spend a certain amount of money and then you would get this palette for free, and that's what I did. And I think this is super cute. And what I really like about this palette is that it's very easy to depot because it's not like plastic, so I could really just like dig my depotting spatula underneath here and just pop them out. And I've actually done that before when traveling. I've taken out like a couple of these shades and put them into like an empty palette along with my other single shadows, and I love it for that reason. Plus it's so small that I could just take it with me anyway, but I don't know why I didn't just do that. I mean, I could have just done that, but I think I wanted to have them all in the same place. You know what I mean. But anyway, this silver right here is probably my favorite silver in my collection. I think this is absolutely amazing. I love this so much. And yeah, I think for this silver alone, honestly, this is why this ended up being so high up on my list. This green here is also really pretty, and I also like the gold a lot. So I don't know, I just like the idea of having like a 6-pan all shimmer not monochromatic, but like an all shimmer companion palette. I think that I wish that other brands did that, to be honest. I know Pat McGrath just came out with something very similar, but she's so expensive. Like, I don't want that. I just want more brands to come up with something like this that's very affordable, that's very small, very sleek, and just very travel friendly. Next up, this is where it's starting to get really hard because I like all of these palettes pretty much equally, but I think the next one is going, I don't want to say this in number 4 though, but I also don't feel like it deserves to be any higher up. Oh man, okay, my next palette is going to be the Smoke Show palette. I love this palette. I have nothing bad to say about this palette. I think the performance of this, beautiful. I love that they listened to us. I love that they did a black and white and gray and silver palette. I've been asking for that forever. It's finally here. I love it. I can't say a bad thing about this palette. I don't know. I don't know why this is number 4, to be honest. I feel like this could have been number 1 because I love it so much, but I just also love the other ones. This is so hard. Next up, man, it's just so hard. Like, I don't like choosing between my babies. It's not fair. Like, this is not something that you should have to do. But I think my number 3 spot is going to end up being the blue palette. This is the Blue Moon palette. Love this palette. I think it's so fun. It's so cute. The color story is beautiful. There's so much variety and everything in here. There is a great variety of shimmers and matte. There's great depth. There's just great variation. I love everything about this palette. There's different formulas in it. I just think this is perfect. I mean, this is all I would ever want in a blue palette. I think this is everything, honestly. Like, they could not have done a better job on this blue palette, in my opinion. And I just love it. So the next palette that is in the number 2 spot is probably, I think, the second palette that I ever bought from Colourpop, if I'm not mistaken, and this is the Just My Luck palette. This is a green one, and I had so much fun playing with this. You might look at this and be like,
Annette, but there's like some neutral shades in here, and it's not really a green palette.
And yada yada yada, but honestly, this shade right here, do you see this? Like, I could marry this shade. Like, this is just absolutely amazing. This is one of my favorite shades in my collection, probably. I love this so much. I even like this brown shade down here because it's such a different kind of shade of brown. It's almost like a dirty olivey but darker brown. I don't know how to explain it. It's just really, really cool for being a brown. And I think that the tones in this palette are just so cool. I love me like some minty shadows, and that's exactly what I feel like you get in this. Like, yeah, this is not really like a green palette, but I love this for what it is. Like, I don't want to judge this because it's not a green palette, but for what it is, I think it's stunning. Again, I think there is just enough like depth in this palette and enough variation in the shimmers that everything kind of flows nicely together. There's a lot of looks you can do that's not going to all look super similar, and that's one of the reasons why I love this palette so much, because I just feel like there's a lot of things you can do with this. So I just think this is so fun. And you can probably guess already what my favorite Colourpop palette is. And I think the reason why this one ended up being in my number 1 spot is not necessarily because it's the most amazing, groundbreaking color story, but it's the fact that it is a color story. You know what I mean? Like, there's just more option, and it's the only palette that I have from Colourpop that's not a monochromatic palette, except for this one. So I felt like I really just had to say this palette, and I had so much fun when I did my 3 looks with this palette. I loved the looks that I came up with. It's kind of an older video. I will link it up in the corner if you want to see it. I was sick when I was doing that, so I think I just played music over my looks for like the first time ever, but I absolutely love the looks that I came up with, and I just think that this palette is super fun. It's super versatile. It has so many beautiful shimmers in here. Like, I know the shimmer looks so boring. Did I have anything on my finger? Let me try my thumb instead. But I mean, this shimmer looks very much just like a blue-brown pigment, like so many other pigments out there, but this is just, I feel like this is just different. Like, it almost looks like a bit of like an oil slick with like a blue shift to it. It's so unique. I love this teal shade down here. So stunning. Love this gold. Love this kind of white inner corner shade with a little bit of yellow in it. I just think that the color combination in this, it just makes me very excited, and I really just like this palette, and I feel like this is a very underrated Colourpop palette. Let me know if you picked up this palette. I don't think it's available anymore. I think this was the holiday palette last year. I think I bought this in like January. I'm not really sure, but I love this palette, and I hope it's still available because I would like to recommend it because it's a great palette. So that's going to be my rankings of my Colourpop palettes. Let me know if you were surprised at all by any of these, because I feel like I wasn't really surprised by any of these rankings personally. But I feel like it would just really depend on the day, like how these rankings would end up being. Like, I feel like if I did this again a month from now, my rankings would be completely different. So I don't know, that's just where I was at today, and this is how my rankings ended up being. If you would like to do a Colourpop ranking on your channel, please do, and let me know so I can watch, because I would love to do so. I know some people have already done this, and I've just really been enjoying watching palette ranking videos. I think it's so fun. So that's gonna be it for today. If you want to see some other ranking videos I've done, you can click on this one or maybe this one. And if you're new to my channel, I would love it if you would consider subscribing, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.